Good evening. Welcome. My name is Hildy Teagan, and it's my privilege to serve as the Dean of the Darla Moore School of Business and to welcome all of you here today. This is a wonderful opportunity, organized, run, well thought out, etc., by our Association of Graduate Women at the Darla Moore School of Business, a group that has taken on an important leadership role in helping to bring important women leaders from throughout the world back to campus to be able to share with us some of their ideas. Today's panel is a terrific panel, a group of 3 women, 2 of whom had the pleasure of studying with us at the Darla Moore School of Business, and 1 of whom has had the pleasure of working with many of our alumni in a key relationship that we have with Eaton Corporation, our sponsor for this event. I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists, and you will see their full bio information in your program, and then I'll turn things over to Emily Crow, who has played an important, particularly important leadership role in organizing this event along with her colleagues in the association. So thank you, Emily. Rhonda Chapman, regrettably not one of our alums. We would have loved to have claimed her. Serves as the Director of Supply Chain Management for Eaton Corporation's Electrical Sector Power Distribution of the Americas. Rhonda visited with us here last year for our Supply Chain Summit last spring, and we're delighted to have you back on campus to share some of your ideas with us today. Mary Methmandanis is one of our alums, studied marketing here as an undergraduate at the Moore School of Business and serves now as a trustee in our Business Partnership Foundation, which is, many of you know, is the foundation that supports us both financially as well as strategically for the work of the school. And we're very grateful for Mary Beth to join us here today. In her professional capacity, she serves as Managing Director at Citigroup's North American Power Investment Banking Group, and she will bring her experiences in working in the power sector to her discussion today. So thank you, Mary Beth. And finally, one of our alums who I had the great pleasure of meeting for the first time last winter on an alumni trip in California when she was living at the time is Candy Chastain-Milkey. Candy brings a terrific set of experiences that she's been sharing with some of our staff and students today in the world of social media, and she serves currently as a consultant with LinkedIn since May of this past year. So Candy, welcome back to campus. And in fact, you grew up in Irmo, I believe, correct? So you're a local girl as well. Wonderful. So I will now turn the lectern over to Emily Crow and welcome each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us.
Can everyone hear me okay? Well, first of all, we do want to especially thank Dean Teagan for being here and making room in her very busy schedule to join us. And again, I do want to thank Eaton, who is the main sponsor of today's event, and they've been instrumental in helping us get this set up. And then we also want to thank the Inn at USC. They have been very generous with their resources and made room for us on somewhat short notice. So we definitely want to thank Amber and all the Inn at USC staff. I'm going to briefly, just before we get started, talk a few quick announcements. Number one, if there are any first-year IMBA students, we have a special sign-up for you at this front counter. So on your way out, if you didn't sign up, please be sure and give us a record that you were here. In just a second, we're going to have our speakers come up. We're going to have a few questions for them that we've let them know about beforehand. And then towards the end, we want to open it up so that any questions that you have, they'll have time to answer. And then, of course, we have the reception that's going to follow in the Palmetto Room, which is just adjoining. So if I could invite our speakers to come on up, and while they're getting settled, let me take just a brief second to tell you about the Moore Association for Graduate Women. And I have to admit, a small typo that was my fault. It's Moore Association for Graduate Women, not of, as you see on your brochure, because we're not just women. We are men and women, but we are here specifically to promote and encourage women to get into leadership positions in the business sector. We're unique in that, of course, we are a school that is named for a woman. We have a lot of female leadership, such as Dean Teagan and Christine Lacola. And we're also a local chapter of the National Association for Women MBAs. So we've got a really unique role, and we're hoping that as this organization grows, we're still fairly young, that we will be able to continue to make ourselves known for just the, in particular, the female leaders that are coming out of this school. So today's topic we took from the national conference, which we just had in Anaheim, California, and it's leadership today and tomorrow. Obviously, women have made a lot of headway into the workforce. We know that a recent study showed that about 50% of the workforce is now female. But of course, there are a lot of challenges facing women, especially as we enter, or as we try and get into those C-level positions like CFO, CEO, COO. So with that in mind, we want to talk about leadership the way it looks today, what our speakers think it's going to look like in the future. And to kick this off, I'd like for each of them, and maybe we can just start with you, Mary Beth, and then go down the table, just to tell us briefly about, give us an overview of your education and then your work experience thus far.
Sure. Well, I started out as what I say is a transplanted Southerner. So I now live in New York City, and I've been in New York City for almost 17 years. Which every now and then I pinch myself because I thought I'll never, I grew up in Hickory, North Carolina, and I'll never live in anywhere other than in the Southeast. And then lo and behold, I find myself in New York City, with a dog and a husband and no washer dryer and all those fun things that go with living in a cubicle in New York City. But I started out my education here at the University of South Carolina. As I said, I grew up in Hickory, North Carolina, and I came to the other Carolina. So I came down to South Carolina because my entire high school went to the University of North Carolina, and I decided I'd go off the beaten track, and so I came down to South Carolina. And I worked here after undergrad for several years for South Carolina Electric and Gas, so for the local utility. And it was right at the beginning of deregulation, and so I worked at SCANA in a demand-side management program, so in a marketing program, doing marketing research, helping the company figure out how much we can gain in efficiencies and reducing load and paying people incentives to do that. So after several years, I decided that I wanted to go get my MBA, and so I went to Vanderbilt University, spent 2 years there, got my MBA with a concentration in finance, and then started out in banking for Nations Bank at the time in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in the mid-90s moved up to New York City and started doing high yield, if you guys are familiar with that, high yield financings, a lot of the LBOs that were in the mid-90s. So we rolled up dry cleaners, we rolled up propane distribution companies, we rolled up funeral homes, about anything that was the mid-90s was the roll-up decade. So I did a lot of that, and then towards the end of the 1990s, I started working back in power and utilities. SCANA once again became one of my clients in the early 2000s. But did a lot of structured finance. Had the joy or not so joyful experience of working on a lot of the structured transactions for Enron and El Paso, and have had a lot of experience in depositions, so that's been very unique to my career. And now I worked for Nations Bank until about 1998, and then went to Credit Suisse and worked there for about 10 years, and now I work for Citigroup, still covering power and utilities in the investment banking group. And it's been an interesting 2 years. I joined Citi in August of 2007, so right as we had the somebody called it the GFC, and you can have lots of acronyms for that, but it's really the global financial crisis. You can make up lots of names for that, but we'll affectionately refer to it as the global financial crisis. And so it's been interesting being both within finance during the past 2 years as well as at Citigroup, and I'm proud to say, and I wanted to go on record here, that Citigroup is in a much better spot than we were last week or several months ago. The firm does have one of the top tier 1 capital ratios at almost 13%, And so the bank is coming back very strong.
Thanks. Next.
Yes.
Well, let's see. I grew up in South Carolina, right down the road in Irmo, and came to the university in '89 and graduated with an undergrad degree from the Moore School in Org Management and Marketing. But in 1993, it was a different world. When you graduated then, there was no technology. There was very limited technology. And of course, my job network base was all about my friends' family members. So here I was, just graduated, and I was hoping and planning to be at Roche Biomedical, being a farm rep. But then I met this wonderful man, and I got married. And he tells me a month before our wedding, we're moving to Mountain View, California. And I said, what? You're taking me out of the Southeast, number one, where my job network is. And I told him I didn't want to get married until I wanted to have a successful career. So we packed up and we moved to California. And let me tell you, it was a complete culture shock for someone from the Southeast now trying to find their way in Mountain View, California. This is Silicon Valley. Every company I went to wanted you to they didn't care about a marketing background or management background. They cared about engineers. So that was my competition, electrical engineers going for marketing roles at these technology companies. But fortunately, I landed a risk position at NASA Ames Research Center, just basically in operations for their security group. And there I was just starting out, learning the ropes, taking that entry-level role. And one day, my manager there said, do you know anything about this thing called the World Wide Web? Remember, this is 94. So I said, yeah, of course. I know everything. And I went home that day, and I bought like 3 books, and I'm going through it, and I'm learning everything I can about the Internet. And so even though I took an entry-level role at NASA, I said, I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to develop this, because that's what that ecosystem in the Valley was all about, technology. So I became this assistant system administrator there at Ames, helping out. And I said, okay, this is going to be my new niche, even though I had this education completely different from what I was doing. So I left Ames and went to join a law firm in intellectual property and as their system administrator. Again, all on the foundation of someone saying, do I know anything about the World Wide Web? But it turned out I did have a passion about computers and technology. I just needed to tap into it. So I went to the law firm and they had 3 offices, and this was in '95. And within my 9 years there at Blakely Sokoloff, I ended up developing their entire network infrastructure and opened up 7 offices nationwide and basically ran all of their technology, from their help desk support to their network support to building their firewalls and all those systems. It was very exciting, very challenging, and probably where I learned everything about how to deal with type A personalities to understanding how to deal with a more male-dominated field. But then after 9.5 years there, I kind of burned out, and I think anyone in technology has that moment of burning out. But it was still exciting. So I left BSTZ, and I went, a very good friend of mine, someone I had befriended when I started at Ames, happened to go work for this internet company called LinkedIn. And she calls me up. She was in my network. I was an early user of LinkedIn. I joined in '03 when they launched. And I didn't know anything what they were doing. I was like, whatever, I'll sign up. That's great. That's enough. But then she reached out to me and she said, we could use someone like you at LinkedIn. I was like, wow, thanks. So I went over there. There was 22 employees. It was a startup company. Everybody did everything at that time. And I basically took on all of their operations as far as from the people side, from the business side. And there I was doing everything from making sure that they were in compliance with their insurance, their liability and risk, to dealing with their equity management for all of their stock, dealing with taking care of someone's HR problem, making sure that they had their benefits, to making sure the facilities were operational and everything was running. Again, you wear many hats when you're at a startup company, and I think I've worn them all. Then our finance person left, and I took over finance and accounting. I took us through an A, B, C, and D round of funding with venture capitalists, helping to tell the story, develop the presentations for the story so that we can raise millions of dollars on a dream of our founders. And it worked. And so today, LinkedIn has over 52 million professional profiles online. We've got over 350 employees, and it's quite successful. And I'm very thankful that my friend made that phone call that day and said, hey, we could use someone like you at LinkedIn. So that's my story.
Well, I'm also from the Southeast. I'm a Southern girl as well. Grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and ended up going to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And all I wanted to do is basically graduate and head out west. So I didn't have this affinity for wanting to stay in the Southeast. I kind of wanted, ever since I was a teenager, I wanted to live in California. But at any rate, went in pre-med, then I changed to pre-law, and then I settled in on a BS in business. Good business school, and it seemed to make a lot more sense than history or something like that as far as what to do with it when I got out. And again, I wanted to graduate, head out west, and start a life and start a career. But as things happen, I also met someone that I fell in love with my junior year, and that he was from out west. He was from Portland, Oregon. He was a paratrooper at Fort Bragg, and I graduated before he got out of the military, so that kind of kept me in central North Carolina. So I graduated early in December, said, hey, I really need a job, it would be good, and started applying, and there was a Tier 1 automotive supplier, and they had a quality analyst position, and sounded great. And really, you would think of an engineering background going into something like that. So I kind of embarked upon being an engineer for a lot of years after that in the automotive world. Started out Carter Weber there, then I moved to Lucas Automotive in the upstate of South Carolina in Greenville, and then I went with Robert Bosch in Charleston, South Carolina. So quality engineering, quality management, manufacturing engineering, and manufacturing engineering management, working very closely with operations and processes and process improvements and buying line, capital expenditures, business cases, and all kinds of things like that. And I loved it. It was really a lot of fun. Looking back, and maybe it'll be in the questions here, but probably should have moved on at certain times, but I was so into what I was doing that, again, I stayed in the engineering mode for quite a while. The only thing that got me out of automotive and Bosch, because I was actually traveling between Detroit and Charleston at the time, working with the big three, so I was commuting between the two. And the only thing that got me out of automotive was this wonderful opportunity to go to Silicon Valley, and I finally got to realize my dream of going to California. San Jose, so Morgan Hill, and I loved it. It was awesome. My karma was so aligned. So, anyway, the only problem was it was 2001, and
sorry,
wasn't necessarily the right time to move your husband, and by the way, the 4 kids along the way after that. So at that point, 2001, 4 kids, 2 dogs, and a husband, and we go from Charleston, South Carolina to Morgan Hill or San Jose, California. And of course, my husband, being an Oregonian, thinks, hey, Californians just come up and buy up their land. So it was a big move for him, and he had become a Southerner all the way to the point of having a Southern accent to this day. So we settled in California, and it was a good year. Well, no, it wasn't a good year. What am I saying? Personally, it was a lot of fun, but professionally, every time the Warren Act kicked in, we would take more people out of the business. We went from 900 people and 2 locations to less than 100 people and 1 location that had a lot of empty space in it. So at the end of the year, really, I needed to move on, and I had 4 offers, so I mean, can't complain about that. Could have gone back to Bosch and 3 other really good offers. I ended up going with Pentair Tools Group. They're now owned by Black & Decker. Well, actually, I think now, as of last week, they're owned by Stanley, or I think they've been bought again. But I went there as a quality director, and it was a good experience because I had plants in China, I had plants in Taiwan, I had plants in the Southeast. So I was going between, Asia and the Southeast. A lot of good experience and exposure there. Big distribution warehouse there, and making the tools as well as bringing them in, et cetera. But I got to a point after a few years there that I felt like I wasn't growing. And as my husband would say, I guess I got bored and needed to do something else. So he had a dream home, which he no longer has, and I hear about, but in West Tennessee. But I ended up joining Eaton Corporation, and I wasn't actively looking, but I was open to opportunities. And I joined Eaton because of the Eaton business system and what Eaton's all about as an organization. And when I was at Bosch, we'd done a lot with policy deployment and cascading the goals through the organization and continual improvement and things like that. And when I went to California to Jabil, that was missing. And I went to Pentair, and it was there, but senior leadership wasn't linked and aligned. They were kind of leaving dead bodies along the way, so we weren't all marching to the same cadence. But at Eaton, it was the real deal. It was the complete package. So 5 years ago, I went to Eaton. We came to Asheville, North Carolina, got promoted, and went up to Pittsburgh as the Director of Operational Excellence for one of our operations. And now I'm back in Asheville as the Director of Supply Chain for Power Distribution of the Americas. So great company. I'm glad to be there. And the partnership that we've developed with the University of South Carolina has been very rewarding. And a lot of the students coming out to see the young talent joining us has also been really nice to see.
Great.
And that's my story.
Well, we have a wealth of experience here, so just to go ahead and dive into these questions, and I might combine a few as we go on for time's sake, but the first one is, how would you describe your personal leadership style, and how has that changed as you've progressed in your career? And then actually I will tag on to that. Do you have a mission statement or personal motto, set of values, anything like that that sort of helped you, that's influenced your leadership style? So you can address any or all of those questions.
Rhonda, you start this time.
All right. Well, as far as a mission or values or whatever, I think respect, the golden rule, trust and respect, whether it's a professional or a personal relationship, I think that's critical. And again, the golden rule, treating others like you'd like to be treated. Trying to understand where people are coming from, having an appreciation for different personalities. And I think that's one thing over the years from a leadership standpoint. I've always had high expectations for myself and for others around me. So it's good to raise the bar and never expect more out of others than you expect out of yourselves. But also help set people up for success. Be engaging, be willing to listen. And I think the further you go up, sometimes it's better to listen more than talk.
Absolutely.
Because you can learn a lot about people when you do that. So again, treating people and realizing one of our values at Eaton is people as our greatest resource. And, the technical tools, Six Sigma, well, all the technical tools, you can learn those. But if you look behind you and you're not bringing people, if you're not leading people, then you won't be successful. And so much of what I do, and I'm sure that these folks do as well, is about cultural change and driving change in the organization and being able to do that successfully.
Well, that was just great. Everything I think I've written down on my cheat sheet was all of that.
So glad you guys let me go first.
Exactly. I know, to reiterate, it is very true. It's for me, as far as the mission statement, was always respect others and make sure that you earn their respect and trust when you're working with people, because people are your greatest assets in any organization. So you always want to build that strong relationship with anyone who's working for you. If it's a peer, a subordinate, if it's another group, another division. Secondly, I'd say, again, it's about the culture in an organization and understanding, keeping your finger on the pulse of the changes that are going on in an organization. As far as style goes, leadership style, I have to say I tend towards what is involved in the emotion part, being that the last 5 years of my life have been about people. And managing people and developing people and coaching. So my style has always been that vision. Grab the vision, be that visionary, try to set the story and have everyone engaged so you all have shared vision. So therefore you're always going towards the same goal and everybody is, along that path contributing. That's been my style. Was that my style back in 93, 94? No, I'll admit, starting out, I was nervous, I was scared, I wasn't as confident as I am 10 years later. So my style back then was very tactical. It was all about being a manager and having the problem, knowing the solution, gathering the resources that you need in order to accomplish your goal and making that happen, and then be worried the whole time that I was going to fail. fast forward now, it's all about making sure that the people who are on my team or who I'm involved with are engaged, they're informed, and they're actually have ownership, and I'm empowering them to better themselves. And I do that with coaching as well. So I believe in a coaching style with people. So that's really my leadership style, and as well as my mission statement, I would say, as far as helping others to help themselves and make them better, because surrounding yourself with smart people is the critical goal for me, because I can't carry it by myself. And if you don't have people behind you and supporting you, or around you or in front of you, then you're going to be a one-man island. So you have to have those people with you. That's me.
I agree with, I think we're reading from the same sheet of notes here. Because I have keyword is respect. Acknowledge that what everybody brings to the table. So it's interesting, the consistency among us. But to add some color to that, and it's addressing one of the questions that is here later, which is are these industries different? And a lot of the industries that we're in are more male dominated than not. Especially I'm in investment banking, and I cover power and utilities, which is a very male dominated industry. And so the clients that I'm calling on, for the most part, CEOs and CFOs are male. And I think I could probably name off the top of my head the number of utilities that may have female CFOs. I don't know that one pops into my head that actually has a female CEO out of power and utility companies. So it's interesting, because you've got to bring, the respect is key, because it helps your own team, and it helps you be a leader of your own team. But then you've got to be seen as a leader to the clients that you're facing, to the customers you're facing, or to other companies that you're facing. And so people want to be able to respect you, respect your knowledge, respect what you bring and what your institution brings to the table. And at the end of the day, especially in my space, it's not necessarily the product that I bring is intellectual capital.
Right.
And so that bringing that intellectual capital is yourself, and it's your reputation and your credibility. And so as you go through life, and depending on your ups and your downs, what you have to realize is that at the end of the journey, the only person is you, and you are the only person, so you have your reputation and your credibility at kind of the end of the day and the end of the line. And so I often think about that, because I think, what can I give back? What can I give to the community? It's not a widget. I'm not going to leave the University of South Carolina with a widget. You guys may buy a widget with what we donate, but we're bringing our intellectual capability, and we're bringing our knowledge and our wisdom to the table. And so you have to be able to, one, respect that, acknowledge what people bring in various perspectives. And I would say, as I've gone through my life and career, I started out thinking, I can always drive the bus, and I will always get in the driver's seat, and I'll drive the bus, and people will come along with me or they won't come along with me. And as I've matured, I've realized that you have to take different people's perspectives. Some people may want the bus to be green. I may want the bus to be yellow. But, together we can make the bus, I think that makes blue, if you put those two colors together. So, together we can make the bus blue. And it still works. It's still a bus, still has a driver's seat. Key still has a brake. So, you can make different things work, and you can take different people's perspectives. And so I think as I've matured, it's listening, and it's realizing that while you do always want to be right, just, everybody always wants to be right, or, most of the time, but sometimes you're not. And you have to realize you have to accept that and be able to redirect and to drive the bus a different way. So I've used a lot of analogies. I like analogies. But I think going back, it's respect and it's acknowledging what everybody else brings to the table.
Well, Mary Beth, I'll, just to keep you talking a little more, because you started off on our next question, which is that you all do work in industries that are very dominated by men. So could you talk a little bit about if you believe there are differences in terms of how women manage versus how men manage, and then also maybe any issues you've had managing men versus managing women?
Sure. I think there are differences. It's hard to, we all have one perspective, and I see some male bodies out there, and you guys probably have a different perspective in terms of what are the differences, and there are oftentimes there's annoyances or frustrations with one set of thinking versus the other set of thinking. But if you take the tact of what I said earlier, which is listening to different people's perspectives and respecting other people's viewpoints. I'll give you guys an example. This happened in my office 2 weeks ago, and I found it fascinating, actually. So I'm in there, and I have a male vice president. So we're working on a transaction. I have a male vice president, and I have a female associate. And so we're talking about an issue, and so both of them are talking at each other. They're not listening to each other. And the male VP is quite short with the female associate, short meaning not respecting what the other had to say. And then she turns right around, and because of that, and I'm watching this like I'm watching a movie. And then she bites back at him, and he bites at her, and she bites at him. And I was like watching my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old. And I said, guys, I said, I'm a mother, but I'm not your mothers. So I don't appreciate what you're doing, so you can figure it out, outside my office, and then you can come back with a solution. But it was fascinating. I thought, this is crazy. And later, when I spoke with each one of them separately, the male VP said, "Oh, she just gets under my skin." And I said, XYZ. I said, but you need to understand and listen to her viewpoint. And he goes, "Yeah, I know." And he says, "My wife tells me that all the time." And so then I'm thinking, well, I'm not your wife, I'm not your mother. I'm actually, so it was just fascinating. And then, later I talked to the female associate, and she goes, "Well, he's just like that." And I said, "Well, okay, but you have to respect what he says to you." And so there was, it gets back around to this listening and just respecting each other and respecting each other's viewpoints. And in the business that I'm in, and probably with a lot of you as well, there's a lot of type A personalities and maybe not necessarily type B personalities. And so everybody wants to make sure their viewpoints are heard. And so what I find in certain instances, and the clients that I work with, is that they just need to talk. And once you sit there and you listen to their perspectives, and you redirect their ideas, it's a fine idea, but they, being a woman versus a man, sometimes they need to feel like they bring the idea. Your client, if your client's a female, she may want to feel like she brought you the idea, but you're kind of spooning it to them slowly. And so it actually, it's interesting being in a pure service business, because you have to try to bring in your client's views and client's perspectives, male or female. So I got a little off kilter there, but those are my thoughts.
Candy, we'll go to you next.
No, I know. I've had quite a few experiences in the area of that male versus female in the workplace, and it is true. It's the communication of it all. It's about how people communicate with each other, which if they would learn to be active listeners instead of passive, always trying to figure out the next element in the argument or the conversation, they would just waste less time and actually get to their ultimate goal. When I was in IT for the law firm, I dealt with a law firm of 41 partners, 2 females only, and one was my mentor. And watching these women navigate in that area was just fascinating to me because it was very male dominated. They came across as someone who had to work harder in order to gain the respect of their peers. And I watched that and I just didn't understand it until after I was going to a conference for technologists, and everyone there was 3 other women in the room, and we were completely dismissed as not even having a voice in the conversation so I understand that you have to overcome some of those boundaries when that is in the workplace or in your environment, in your field of being heard and being listened to. But getting to your point also about having the 2 people in the room, when I went into HR for LinkedIn, I dealt with so many different personalities, and that's what HR is. We are about understanding behaviors. I think we're more psychologists than we are actual managers because we have to manage the behaviors. You're the mom of the organization. So if you have 2 executives who are both peers and they are both wanting to win that argument because they both have their opinions, they have their gosh darn it, this is my way and it's going to be this way. You have to constantly interject and say, listen to each other. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation. That means you have a chance to speak and then you have a chance to speak. Don't make it into an argument. Relinquish some of the control was always the advice that I would give to both men and women when they were having a conversation that they could not meet eye to eye or face to face on coming to a solution. So as far as the styles in the workplace, I have seen different women trying to be the aggressors in some of it because they felt like they needed to in order to prove a point in a male-dominated field. And I would always go after them and try and coach them and say, you don't have to put up this front. You are successful. You have your reputation. You are wonderful. You're great. And with the men, I'd have to say, you need to listen. You need to stop and listen to what someone is saying to you instead of automatically shutting them down because you want to win the argument. And I'm not saying that's the way all men and women are. It's just my own experience in that. But it's basically everything you said I was completely agreeing with. It's just giving some of my experience with it.
Well, going into automotive straight out of college, obviously a lot of males and somewhat male-dominated. So it wasn't uncommon at all to be the only female in meetings in my career. It happens a little less often now, or a lot less often. But last week we were with one of our suppliers, kind of old school, and I looked around the room, and I'm the only female there. I would say I haven't found managing men versus managing women to be necessarily more or less challenging. You just have to approach it differently. But then again, don't stereotype men and don't stereotype women. And a lot of people tend to do that. I think it's more of appreciate the fact that there are differences, but hone in also on different personality types. And again, the listening thing. And I would say for any of us, but okay, in particular women, I guess, the credibility factor comes into play. Know what you're talking about, immerse yourself, learn and engage. The whole trust and respect and listening and candid, open, honest discussion. And don't play the female card. I mean, don't sit there and feel sorry for yourself because, hey, I'm a female in the business world. I've always kind of viewed that as a bit of an advantage. Because, you are, well, you're not unique these days, but, you also do have some advantages as well. The shared vision and goals, I think that helps us, get people on the same page, whether it's male, female, or different personalities, et cetera. Getting everybody headed in the same direction and trying to achieve the same thing. I've always told folks in my group that trust and respect. I don't care if you have anything in common. Would be nice if you like each other, but you don't even have to like each other, but you've got to have trust and respect. And when I have people in my groups with conflicts, a lot of times I'll throw them in a foxhole together, and when the bullets start flying overhead, you kind of learn to take care of each other. So and I'll use another example. When I went into a quality manager role at Bosch, and it was kind of a hot seat because we were having some customer problems, and the manager that I replaced got sent off to Juarez to go into a special project because one of the big three managers said he wouldn't work with him anymore. So I stepped into kind of the hot seat there. And one of the first things I had to do was establish relationships. So whether it's with the customer or whether it's inside the business, you need to have relationships, again, based on trust and respect and open feedback and open communication. But, getting to know people and getting to know their perspectives. And, you can say Ford or Daimler, Chrysler. I mean, there's multiple customers even within a single customer. So getting to know what's going on in people's minds, why they're forming the perspectives. Because, daggers kept flying my way because certain people would say something to someone else. So got in there, established those relationships, got to understand people and what their needs were, and then build that solid foundation underneath you. You can only dance so long, but if you're dancing on quicksand, you're going to go under.
Yes.
So, I would say build that credibility, build that solid foundation, but also understand throughout your careers you're going to need a lot of allies to help you do business. You're going to need executive sponsorship. You're going to need people following your lead. You're going to need strong business cases. So I think all that's important. And when it comes to being a leader and managing, if I've got a conflict with people in my organization, just sit them down and talk to them and try to speak objectively. I've always said, try to check the emotion at the door and bring the passion with you. So hit it head on, and that usually works.
Well, I'm going to insert a question here that two of you addressed that issue of credibility. So I know this wasn't something we talked about beforehand, but maybe could you just expand on that a little bit in terms of what did you do to build your credibility, and what have you seen people do that has hurt their credibility?
Oh, and you want to go?
You start. You haven't started first yet. Start in the middle.
Building credibility. Well, one other thing I wanted to say, too, from what you were saying is never, you always hear that phrase, never judge a book by its cover. And you will be judged. No matter what you're doing in the business world, we all sometimes get judged. And it's a bad behavior, I think. But I was judged. An example of that was I had an executive. First day that they met me, they were a brand new executive at the company, and he saw my profile and said, she only has an undergraduate degree and she's only been at this place for this long. She really hasn't done very much. She hasn't worked for a large company. And on his first meeting of me, he said, well, Candy, I think you're good, but I just don't think you'll ever be amazing. Okay. So my first response to that was, oh, I hate you. But that was all inside. Because you put on that face. And I could have played the female card and tried to get emotional, which is a stereotype, and I apologize, and I'm not trying to sound bad about when I say that. But I could have done that. But my response to him was, first I calmed down, I counted to 10, and I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. And I said, but you know what? You just met me, and if I can be honest with you, you've not been an executive for so long, so we'll see how you do. I said, but I'm going to prove you wrong, but I'm not going to. I don't want to prove you wrong because I'm going to let my reputation and what I do here at this company show for that. So you're going to eat those words, and we'll talk in a week after I calm down. So what I learned was if you are in those situations where you feel like you don't have the confidence or the credibility to stand behind you, especially on a first impression, is to be honest. Don't be defensive and don't be angry, just to be honest and have that conversation back. True story to add on to that was now that same executive and I are best friends, this person has written a great endorsement for me on LinkedIn and has thought that says I'm one of the hardest workers he's ever met in his life, and he'd have me on his team any day. And he did say, he's like apologized for having that conversation with me, because I hold it over. I tell him all the time, remember that time you said you're good, but you'll never be amazing. So it's building that credibility is important, but it also starts with your own confidence in yourself in order to do what you need to accomplish. Whatever you set as your personal goal, you can fulfill your own personal goal because you control your destiny. Don't let anyone else control your destiny. So building your credibility, getting the education you need, developing those relationships with people, recognizing that you don't know everything, and therefore you need to continue to build your network of people who can help you become better. It actually builds that credibility. That's why my viewpoints has changed so much. I used to be I got to be a hard worker. I got to do everything someone says, because that was how I was going to build my reputation. Now it's all about, I have the confidence in order to be able to walk into any situation and recognize what I need to get to accomplish. So building the credibility factor is something that you just have to build within yourself and engage and correlate that with your confidence in yourself. And I always tell people who come to my office about trying to build their reputation within an organization because they're trying to get on better projects or work on new things. It's like, don't let arrogance get in the way of confidence, because people don't like arrogance. They like confidence, and they like people who are strong and assured of themselves, but aren't, what's the word, cocky?
Mm-hmm.
So people can read through that all the time. And if you are basing your reputation on arrogance alone, then your credibility factor starts to go down a lot in an organization. Well, at least in my organization.
There's got to be substance there.
It's got to be that substance there. So that was my,
Good.
yeah.
Well, I would just say, to kind of play on those comments, there's going to be a lot of days out there as you embark on your career and as you go through your career that you're going to feel like you're on top of the world. There's going to be, you're talented people. There's going to be a lot of things that boost your confidence. And occasionally there's going to be days where you don't think the world's fair. So I would just say be able to step back and objectively look at those, and there's going to be a lot of things outside your control, like the comment that executive made. Yeah. And you've got to step back and say, okay, what could I have done differently? Mm-hmm. Try to take it as good feedback, but also don't let it detract you, or don't let it tear you down, or don't just dismiss things. Try to understand where people are coming from. And there's a lot of enlightened leaders out there, and there's a lot of leaders that, maybe shouldn't be leading. So. And the other thing is, and there are a lot in between. So as you become leaders, also think about the impact you make on people. Do you build them up, and do you help them really, realize their potential, or are you maybe unconsciously tearing them down and hurting their confidence level? So.
Yeah, to add to what Candy and Rhonda said, the other way you can think about it, especially around credibility, is recognize that there's a lot of things that are out of your control. There's a lot of things that are going to be out of your control. But if you think about what is your, and I ask myself this, what is my sphere of influence? I have a sphere, and there are factors within that sphere that I can influence and I can make an impact. And if I think about those things, then it helps me in times when there's a lot of things going on that are out of my control. I think, okay, well, what do I have an impact on? And that helps me kind of get back to the self-confidence and building your own credibility back, because you think, okay, well, I can go do X, Y, Z within this problem, within this situation. And you realize that sphere of influence that you exercise, you may make that bigger because of the tack you've taken, because of your ability to redirect and move that sphere and make it bigger. But your credibility is all within your own mind and your own view of how you think you can impact others. So think about it that way too, and think about what do you know that can help impact or improve that sphere of influence you have.
One thing I would add to the credibility thing, I mean, you're going to be problem solvers as you go out into the world. And operating in an engineering mode for a lot of years in automotive taught me a lot about that. I mean, I'm very data-driven, and data can be misleading. I would send a young engineer out and say, go find out what the root cause is, go find out what's going on. They may talk to one person and come back and say, well, this is what's happening. Well, one, you don't have any data to back that up. And two, talk to about 10 different people, and then you'll be on the trail to find out what's really going on and then be able to validate it. Turn the problem off, turn it on, and then put in good corrective preventative action. So I would say in whatever role you're in, you're going to be solving a lot of problems out there. And that's a lot about credibility is being right. You won't always be right, but you want a really good batting average. So the more you can speak with data and make sure you've got data to back up and business cases to back up what you're doing, the better off you'll be from a credibility standpoint.
Well, I think we'll do probably about 2 more questions and then open it up for questions from the audience. So let's turn now to the work-life balance issue, because I know all of you have very busy lives, busy personal and professional lives. So can you talk a little bit about have you been able to find a balance, and have there been sacrifices you've needed to make to get to where you are now?
I'll go first. So I have 3 children. I have a soon-to-be 9-year-old, a girl, 7-year-old little boy, and a 4-year-old boy. So I have had to make some sacrifices, and there is no work-life balance. That for me, I think that doesn't exist. There's work, and there's life, and there's work and life, and balance doesn't really come into play that much. So what you try to do is you try to manage it. So you manage work and you manage life, and it kind of melts together some way. But there have been sacrifices, and I think it's all in what you own, what you want to do yourself. So as you guys are starting to look at positions and jobs, and I know some people are already in certain positions and jobs, you just have to say, I want to do X, Y, Z. And I think that anybody who puts their mind to doing X, Y, Z without being crazy or something can get there. You can accomplish, set your goals, and go about accomplishing your goals in ways that you can do it. So it may take you longer. You may have to go a little circuitous route to get there, but you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. And you just have to. It's a give and a take. I've got a very supportive husband, and frankly, without my husband, I don't know how I would do this job. It's next to impossible, because when you have 3 small children, they're at one point. Here's a little story. At one point, I have. It was all I could do. I remember this. I was trying to get out the door from early morning meeting, and at the time, I think my oldest was maybe 3, and then I just had 2 at the time. I had a 3 and a 1-year-old, and I was trying to get out the door, and both of them were attached to my legs, and I could not get out the door, and they were just screaming at the top of their lungs, "Mommy, I don't want you to leave." And so in New York City, we opened our door, and the elevator was right there. And so because the elevator bank is right there, with the elevator shaft, you could hear my kids screaming up and down the floors. So I get in the elevator. I finally unpeel them off my legs, and I ride down the elevator, and I'm on the main floor, and I still hear them screaming. So that took all I could do to walk out the door. And it's just one of those things that, you know what? They're kids. They're fine now. They don't even remember that. I remember that. But they don't even, they're like, "What are you talking about, Mom? I never did that. I never hung onto your leg, screamed. No way, not me." But so as the thing that I feel okay about is that when they're that young, even though it will be the hardest thing you can do, peeling them off your leg, they won't remember. Now as they get older, that's a whole other thing. And so, ask me in 5 years how I deal with those mental gymnastics. But so far so good.
You want to go next?
Sure. Well, I've always been very driven, and so if you'd have asked people early in my career if I had a good work-life balance, they would have probably said no. But I think, I think it's important. It probably is more managing than balancing most times. But I think it's also a very personal thing. And if your balance works for you and your family, then you've got a good balance. I mean, I'll have to admit, I've got 4 kids, and my youngest, when he was 2, called me Mommy home, not Mommy, because I've traveled like 75% of the time. And then I've had another kid call me to pick him up at school, and I was in Dominican Republic, and so it's kind of like, well, it'd be a heck of a commute. So, and then my husband has accused me of not sending my itineraries as much as I used to, but it gets pretty frequent. And then again, I've had other times when my husband's like, "When are you leaving again?" Like, get out of here. So I mean, and I do think as a family, or at least as a husband-wife team, it's made us stronger. I tell my husband the thought of me is a lot better than the real me. So, you just got to figure out how you make it work. And it's going to be tough if you're juggling 2 careers and sacrificing who gets to make this move and how do you follow that kind of thing. My husband, when we lived in Charleston, owned his own company, and right before we moved to California, he sold the company. And, being the president of the company, he spent a lot of time on the golf course, actually. But, he was with the kids, and then when we went cross country, he sold the company, and then has remained at home since then. So, we knew the kids, we needed that support mechanism. And I do find a lot of my female colleagues at the director or VP level, it's not uncommon for a husband to be in that role. Not saying that'll be right for you or that you'll evolve in that direction, but, I've seen it both ways. But, again, whatever works for you and your family. And you're going to have to talk about it. And it's not always easy answers.
Work-life balance, I'll admit, not good. For me, just no children, so just my baby was career. So I feel like I sacrificed a lot of something out of my life that I didn't get to accomplish, but we're hopeful, just try and start a family now. But we put that aside because working for a law firm for that many years, I was on call 24/7. We had beepers, but well, that's way dating me. But then you get the cell phone and you have your Nextel, etc. And then so I was always traveling, always in the field. So having a partner, a strong partner, someone who believes in what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish for yourself, is so beneficial. I mean, I'm so thankful every day to have such a strong, supportive husband, because I could tell, if I'm coming in at 10 o'clock at night, and I've been gone since 8 o'clock that morning, and I do this 5 nights in a row, and I guess what, I'm going in on Saturday because I need to redo a router. It can be very challenging to a relationship. So making sure you take time to foster your own relationships that you have at home and communicate and be open about what's going on, and then trying to make sure you take that time. Do work-life balance. I know every person I interview at LinkedIn is always saying, well, what's your work-life balance? And it's like, hey, work-life balance, again, it's all determined upon yourself. It's what you choose to how you want to balance your life. And so, that's when we always, most companies now offer, there's, a gym facility so you can go work out during the day. And there's, cafeterias on site so that you can go and have your lunch and eat there, so that you're not spending a lot of you get a lot more done during your day, so that you can leave work early or to go and take care of what you need to do for personal. I've had a lot of employees who've worked for me who were married with children, and, you have to make, as a manager or a director, whatever role you're in, you have to, make sure you're helping them out too, and understanding that they need to go and leave and take care of their children at home. Mm-hmm. So we're you want to have your own work-life balance, and if you want to work 60, 70 hours a week, and that's what's important to you, then that's your choice. And if you've got employees who can only do so much during the day because they have so many outside activities, well, you make concessions for them as well, but do they go further in their career? Sometimes not. Just from my own experience of seeing it. It's how you want to gauge your meter on where's your work life and work balance and your life balance is going to be. So, but as far as making sacrifices, I'll admit I made a lot of them to just further my career. So.
We'll do one last question before we open it up to the audience. What advice would you give the women in this room who will soon be graduating with a master's degree?
I would, depending on what you want to do, if you want to go career full time, which was what I chose to do and what I've chosen to do, it is going to be something where, alongside this work-life balance, the family part of that. I was in my career for almost 15 years before I had children, so you do have to set aside, do you want to go after the career, or in my mind, or do you want the family? And I think it is a bit of the either or, depending on how hard you want to drive for whatever you want to drive for. And so my suggestion would be, try to think about your next 5 years. And I hate when people ask that interview question. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Like, who knows? But at least try to think about your life, maybe as you're starting out, in kind of 2 to 5 year buckets, and say, okay, in 2 to 5 years, where do I want to be? And then reassess maybe 2 years from then, and try to make those kind of increments, because if you say, I want to be here in 20 years, gosh, 20 years is such a long time. Think about it in smaller bite sizes, and try to make up your mind if you want to go at the career thing kind of full bore, and that may lead you to a different set of decisions, or do you want to try to have a more balanced approach, because that may lead you in a different direction.
I really agree with having a plan, a living document, whether you're coming out of undergrad or coming out of MBA, to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of where you want to go. And it's going to change, but at least have that in the back of your mind, personally, professionally, and be willing to step back and look at it and adjust as you go, because there will be a lot of life-changing events that happen along the way, and career-changing events. And I guess I blended a little bit of the career and the family, because I did start earlier with the kid thing. I had my first child like 5 years after I started my career, so not right away, and then every 4 years, and then 3 years, so 3 sons and a daughter. So, but I mentioned earlier when I was talking the bio, I think I stayed in some jobs longer than I should have, and I don't know if I would say it was because of the kids or because, hey, I was really getting into what I was doing and really knew I was making a difference. But maybe if I'd had that career plan there and been thinking more in those terms, I would have stepped back and go, maybe it's time to move on. And then again, I would have to then look at the family and see how that all played together. But
the plan is perfect. Setting your goals, being prepared for contingencies. Life can throw you a lot of things that'll get in the way, and you have to shift. Being flexible, always knowing that there's always another path along the way to go down to reach that goal. Stand out in an organization with your reputation, and don't let people get in the way of your successes, with doing it within reason. I mean, you want to be successful, and you want people to admire you and respect you for what you're bringing to the table, because at the end, when you go at the end of the journey, it's all about you and who you are. So that's what I would do. Go in any role you go into, and go in it with your own plan of how you're planning to accomplish it and what your goals are going to be in order to be successful. And I think the increments is great to think about that too, in 2 to 3 years. You can't think of it in 20, because like I said, it's going to change. I never thought I would move to California right after I graduated. But also, I'm sorry, that phone just threw me off. But I have to say, as far as like when I got out of school and to where it is today, I mean, right now it's frightening when you look at the unemployment numbers out there. So for me, if I were telling any person who's graduating today, it's go in and be the best person you can be in any organization and take and make something happen for yourself. Being loyal to a company is a great thought, but it's not always going to be that way. Companies are going under all the time. People are being bought out. There's a lot of acquisitions going on. So remember that, you know, having that 2 to 3 year is a good way of looking at it, because you may not be at that company after 2 to 3 years. And realizing when you're getting stagnant in a role too, and if you see no growth potential, and if that's your goal is to go up another step and you don't see that path there, learn that now at the very beginning when you go into an organization, and don't stay there long. Go and seek out, be a passive candidate, and go out and seek out other opportunities and do your research on companies and be on LinkedIn. Sorry, I had to plug. And go out there and create, like I said, create your own destiny, because I stayed at my law firm for 4.5 years too long, and I really wish I had, you know, if I could go back in time, I probably would have only stayed at that law firm for 5 years, and then I would have gone on to the next opportunity. But the money was great, my work was great, my career was at a high, I was the top person, I was at the level of partnership in the firm. I had made myself, so I had actually accomplished those goals that I said I was going to start out when I took that role. And I just hung out and stayed for 4.5 more years. And that's one thing going back, I wish I had not stayed as long as I did, because I think I would have enjoyed another opportunity to expand and learn new things about not only myself, but about another industry or something that I didn't think I could do that I knew I could, and just find out and discover what that is. So that would be my advice.
Also, make sure your employer, whether you're switching employers or your current employer, make sure you have those discussions about career and career aspirations. You know, you may be sitting there thinking, hey, I'm being looked over, I'm not getting opportunities, and they may be sitting there thinking, you're perfectly happy. And
you don't want anything. You don't want to grow.
Yeah.
Succession planning in a company is something that in my company, we're always talking about how we can build our own internal assets and continue to grow them in their field of expertise or what they want to do, and find out if a company actually does invest their time in succession planning, and see if there are internal paths in order to doing it. Because nothing drives you crazy to see someone come in, they hire from the outside for someone above you, and you didn't have that opportunity to go for it. And so definitely keep finding out what's going on within that company that you're in.
Well, we've got about 15 more minutes, so we want to open the floor for questions. And we have a microphone coming around because we are videotaping this. So I see a hand right there.
I was just going to say we are passionate people at any age, and I wanted to ask a personal question, two-part. How old are you? And have you ever cried at a critical moment?
Dang, good question.
I'm 29 and holding.
I actually just turned 50 this year. It's kind of hard to say. And yes, I have cried at a critical moment much earlier in my career typically, but I always went to the restroom to do that.
38, hitting 39 soon, and yes, I have cried at a critical moment. When that gentleman said, "You're good, but not amazing," I waited until it was hard, but I waited until I was outside of that office and almost to the ladies' room where it just started coming out. But yes, I have cried at a critical moment and tried hard not to let the audience see too much of that.
43, and went to the bathroom, cried once, nobody saw me, ran to the bathroom, and I was so mad. All I could do was cry.
Yeah. And saying really bad words.
Up here.
First, I applaud you all for answering that question. But I'm Allison Spry, and I did pursue a marketing and international business degree here from the Darla Moore School of Business. I now work at SCANA as a fossil hydro procurement agent, and never thought in a million years it would be my job to put on the hard hat, the steel-toe boots, and be out there with the guys looking at turbine parts. But I just want to know, looking back, if you could answer this question for yourself, would you make any more career changes earlier? And you touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to know, it's hard to know when you should make that risk or make that jump and take those risks. If you looked back, would you have made those moves sooner, or would you kind of stay where you are because you just don't know what jobs would come available?
For me, I wouldn't have changed anything. I look back over my career and the moves when I've made the moves, and I wouldn't have changed anything.
I think I already covered mine. As far as you want to, again, if it starts to feel like you're stagnant and you're not moving forward, or if you've hit the ceiling and there's no place else for you to go, yeah, I should have changed. And that was during the boom of the Valley too. So I really wish I had taken a few other opportunities, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm humbled by it now.
I would have changed a lot of things. I think I've learned a lot over the years that I would have gone back and done some things differently. Yes, staying in certain roles too long. And just my focus. I mean, you mature and you just see how you would have maybe done a lot of things differently. But mainly the role thing, switching roles sooner. I will say also, as you go out into your careers, don't get tracked as far as being a quality person versus an operations person. If you can be well-rounded and do operations, do sales and marketing, do that breadth of experience is really important.
A couple of you cautioned against generalizations. The South has plenty of generalizations. You've lived many places. Any of those generalizations about the South, and particularly as it relates to gender, have you found any of those to be true or untrue?
I've actually felt like at times it was held against me that I was from the South. I mean, the accent.
The accent?
Yeah. People have a certain connotation of the Southern accent, and, it is what it is. Mine may be thicker than maybe others, but, people that would jump to conclusions because you are from the Southeast.
What about progressing or working as a female in the South versus other regions?
Well, it's probably easier being a Southerner in the South but I didn't find that in California.
No, California. That's where you're in New York, so I don't.
What I found is that if you're, and I say this to people because I'm from the Southeast, I can understand people from the Southeast, but it's very interesting because there is still so much of this Northern versus Southern, Yankee versus Confederate, and I just hold my head and I think, holy cow, that was so long ago. But people still, even my parents still say that. I'm like, oh, you're such a Yankee. You live in New York, and I'm thinking, this is not, the Civil War anymore. But there are generalizations. I find it too, because when I tell people I was born and raised in the Southeast, they say, you don't have a Southern accent. And I say, okay, well, just give me a couple of y'alls and, it'll come out. But there is a generalization that you do have to overcome, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think the accent gets in the way where people, even in California, because you have to get past that, oh, your accent's so cute, let me hear that. And it's like, first when I'm having a conversation with someone, I was like, yes, I'm from the South. You will detect an accent as we're having this conversation. However, it may slip out every now and then, but you have to think about it. And people will, there's a lot of generalizations. If you have a Southern accent, they don't think you're as educated as the rest of the world, especially being out. No offense, I'm just saying, it's just my experience dealing with the alumni out in, not of South Carolina, but from different schools and universities that I work with. They're like, well, you're from the South. They don't have educational schools there. There's no Ivy there. It's like, oh, really? Stanford's only a Vine, it's the constant comments that we'd have back and forth. But I'm like, but we sure can play football. I mean, that was pretty much all it was about. So there is generalizations. I don't necessarily get that whole north-south thing, as much, we had in California when people were like, you're from the South, but.
Yeah, I did my MBA at Penn State, and I didn't really get it there from a university standpoint. But I have sensed it some in like some leaders and, going into a southern plant and making comments about the way people talk. And I'll have to admit, I moved from Asheville, lived there a year, and moved to Pittsburgh for 3.5 years. And when I would come back to Asheville, the accent seemed very strong to me, and now I've probably picked it back up the last year. So.
I think we have time for one more question.
In our MBA program, we've learned a lot about how women don't negotiate enough for salaries or promotions. Are there any times when you've been glad that you've spoken up, or conversely, is there a time when you should have been more quiet? Just if you could speak a little about that, and any advice you have for us that are going into jobs.
Anyone?
Not the best of times for negotiations right now in the business.
That's true.
I mean, I've felt like as I've gone into new roles, I've been able to negotiate well. Going to a new company, have been able to negotiate very well. As far as within a position, there's not as much negotiation. So I think I've probably been a pretty good middle ground in the way I've treated it.
I've negotiated quite, especially later in my career, even internally, when you're getting a promotion, if something's coming up, if there's bands, there's always salary bands that you're going to go and fall in. Oh, you're a this level employee, so therefore here's the range that you're going to make as this level of employee. A lot of the large companies all have their bands. And being that I ran comp for 4 years, I get the whole salary. We'd have employees come and want to negotiate a salary when they're coming, for a promotion. So I would do the same thing. Go and what your value is. If you do the market you can go out and get analysis on what the salaries are going to be for a particular role you may going for, or what, if you were going to be promoted, what you feel that salary band should be. And so when you do get a number, I never look at it as that being the final number. It's like, no, I think we need to, let's discuss that. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation. And as long as you are thinking intellectually about it and you have your data to back you up, you can have that conversation, but don't come across as being greedy and aggressive and saying, well, I can get this, this, and this from this company. That you're done.
Ooh, yeah.
You're out the door. I always, so I had to negotiate with the Procter & Gamble, a candidate that we were hiring at LinkedIn was out of Procter & Gamble. So I knew what the bands of salaries were, and I knew exactly from asking my network, hey, what did they pay for this position? And he and I went back and forth, and I ended up having to play good cop, bad cop against this candidate. But I said, listen, you come in and prove yourself. We can talk about you getting that salary, but off the bat, this is what you're going to get. This is what you're coming in at. Take it or leave it. And then, of course, instead of being respectful of that, he returned and said, oh, well, I can get this, this, and this at this other company. And I said, fine. Hung up. I said, you go for it. And I hung up the phone. And then, of course, they had to come crawling back to me and say, I'm sorry, I really do want to work at LinkedIn. I said, okay, but don't play hardball with me. This is where you are. So you can gauge how you want to negotiate when you want to. If you were trying to do a salary negotiation, you can figure that out. Just feel it out and see what's going on. Ask people who work there. Did you negotiate your salary? Is this a good offer? I mean, not someone who, maybe a former employer, whatever. Yeah. Use LinkedIn, find it out. But then you can go and just say, sorry. And you can just go and that's the way you can use LinkedIn is you can go and ask people, about, did you negotiate your salary? And I've had so many people who've left LinkedIn and gone on to other companies who've contacted me and said, hey, this is what they offered me. What do you think? And I'd say, go back. You can go back and you can at least get a little bit more. You can go for a sign-on bonus. You can ask for a sign-on bonus. The only thing they can do is say no. Mm-hmm. So you can gauge it based upon the conversation you're having with that hiring manager or that recruiter or whoever you're dealing with to get that final offer.
In investment banking, there's nobody shy of negotiating.
Oh no, sales and finance people. It's always about that's never the bottom line.
Yeah.
And while companies don't like you playing one company against the other, if you've got a situation that you need to just be upfront and honest with, I would say share that. And I'll give you an example. When I came to Eaton, I had an offer in hand from Denso. Mm-hmm. And the interview process wasn't going as quickly as Eaton, and I really wanted an opportunity to go to Eaton, or at least be able to make a decision between the two. So I pretty much had to say, can we speed up the interview process? Not the most popular thing to say, mm-hmm. but they did accommodate it.
Well, I think we are about out of time, so we're going to wrap this up before we adjourn to the Palmetto Room for a reception. First of all, let's give our panelists a round of applause. That was wonderful. So Rhonda, Candy, and Mary Beth, thank you so much for being here today and for giving us just your insight and letting us learn from your experience. A few last-minute announcements before we have the reception. Number one, just again, we want to thank Eaton, obviously, for sending us Rhonda, and then also the reception that we're about to go to is sponsored by Eaton. And again, we do want to thank the Inn at USC just for being very generous and letting us use their space, and they gave us quite a good deal. So we just want to thank them as another sponsor. There's a couple of staff people who really helped put this event together. Tina Poindexter, I think she had to leave, and Gail Crouch, Jacqueline Hunt, and Lainey Grubbs. And then we want to recognize Jane Willis, who is our faculty advisor, and also Gabrielle Clark, who is instrumental in helping us get these panelists here. So thank you both so much. And finally, I'd like to quickly recognize the Moore Association for Graduate Women Officers. If you could just stand real quickly. We have Jaquina Bland, who does our public relations. Sarah McCown, who's our treasurer. She's also on the leadership team of our finance club and is putting together some really a big training session early in December. And then Michelle Phillips, who's our vice president. And I have to give a special thank you to Michelle because she's really brought a lot of passion and dedication, has put together many events for us, and has actually worked with Kelly Truesdale, one of our male members in the audience, to put together a new website. So she is a VP extraordinaire and just deserves some extra.
And may I say, if you would like to donate to the organization,
And that.
And you can go ahead and donate through PayPal.
So for those of you maybe watching on video that didn't catch that, yes, I did have that in my notes. For those of you, we are, of course, an organization for students and also for our alumni and the women in the South Carolina community. And we're run by students, and so most of our funding comes from students. But if anyone would like to find out more about us or make a donation, we have our website, which is magw.info. And so again, that website, we have Michelle to thank for it, but we call ourselves MAGWA for short, so it's magwa.info. So that's it. We'll wrap it up. And please come join us in the Palmetto Room to have some refreshments and get to network a little bit with our panelists. Thank you so much.